So Regina, give me an idea about what is going to be on our agenda for today.
So first of all, I wanted to tell you about one of my friends. So the last 2 weeks ago when we had the class, he told me that we were talking about teenagers and my youth group, if you remember. And after we talked together, the day after that, I was talking to one of my friends. She's my classmate on BIG, and she as well has a junior youth group, and she has lots of problems with her youth. They cannot become friends together. Her group are all separated from each other. They are so they don't listen to what she tells, and she has lots of problems. So we were talking, we were consulting that what I do, what she does in her group. So we were exchanging information, and I told her about the 500 star, and I told her that I have a teacher, I have a professor. We talked about this, and I told her short of what we had talking about in our class, and I explained to her the 500 star, and I told her that she can ask her junior youth group to do the star, to explain their feelings, to get to know each themselves better, and to become friends with each other. And she was so excited, and she really loved the idea of the star, and she said that she's gonna try it and see how it will work. So I wanted to thank you again and tell you that I had this conversation with my
My
friend.
pleasure, my pleasure. Let me actually send you the five-pointed star.
Uh-huh.
I have a, we talked about it. Actually, we did a presentation. I did a presentation
Uh-huh.
last night for the group because we were talking about metaphoric thinking.
Uh-huh.
And so
Uh,
let's see.
oh, that's nice. Thank you.
And then you see that on the top, I have put the quotation from Baha'u'llah that
Uh,
talks about knowing our own self, right?
yeah, I can see this.
But you can explain to your junior youth that we all have two selves according to the writings. So we have so let me actually do this. Let me just share the screen with you. How's that? And
Good.
explain it, and then we are going to be recording it. How's that? Because we are recording
Great.
it.
Yeah, we are recording it.
I'm gonna be first before I go to. I better share the screen. So I'm gonna share the screen with you so you can see that, and that makes it a lot easier. So
Yeah, I can. I have your screen now.
okay, so now you can see my screen, right? So what we have here is we have all of us have our five senses. These are Abdul Baha talks about our physical powers, right?
Yeah.
So when we smell something, the dog smells it too. When we taste, the dog or the giraffe can also taste. When we see, they can see, even sometimes can see much better than we do. Their senses, in some respect, some of them are a lot more powerful than ours. So what are the other two left? Five senses would be what?
Yeah.
What are the five senses when we say our physical powers, our sense
Like
perception?
smelling, touching,
Uh,
hearing,
yeah,
seeing, and
yeah,
tasting.
yeah, exactly. So all of those five senses, all of those we share with animals.
Yeah.
And sometimes in some of these senses, like the dog's sense of smell is a lot more sharper, stronger, more accurate than ours is.
Yeah.
So that is not our distinction.
Mhm.
We are, as human beings, we are not distinct because of our sensory perception or sense perception or these physical powers that Abdul Baha
Yeah.
talks about, right? On the flip side of that, underneath, I mean, on the other side of it, our spiritual self has spiritual powers that Abdul Baha talks about our thoughts, our understanding, our imagination, our memory. These are our spiritual powers. That means that our soul basically is what makes our eyes to see. When then Rumi talks about when you see something, it is not the brain is the basically a computer, but our soul is the one that sees through the vehicle of the eye. The soul uses the brain and the eye to see. And so that's why we make sense of things in different ways depending on everyone's spiritual powers and capacities and how much we have developed it and what we have done, right? Good so far?
Yeah, okay.
So here, let's say we are sitting in a circle. Everybody's sitting in a circle, right? And you see my cursor, right? And somebody in the circle smiles.
Yeah.
What do you think? Here we are looking at the feeling. What do you think people in the circle, somebody who's looking at that smile, how would they be feeling? What would be the feeling?
Probably happy.
Okay, so let's say they're happy. And what would be their intention?
To smile back.
And what would be their action?
To smile.
Exactly. So is it possible that the same smile is going on and another person sitting in the same group is feeling uncomfortable? They just feel EBGBs. They don't like it. Possible, right?
Yeah.
What do they want to do?
To frown or turn their face back.
Yes, and their action would be
to do it, to turn back.
Yeah, or maybe they might even fidget or get up and leave. There are all different kinds of ways that a person disconnects themselves from something they don't like. So the question is, what is the difference between these two people? The stimulus, what happened in the world, was the same. Somebody smiled, but completely two different experiences. One person felt happy and wanted to connect and smile back. The other person felt uncomfortable and they wanted to disconnect and they turned their face away. So what played a role in these two different experiences?
The way they thought about the smile and the way they perceived the meaning of that smile.
Yes, the way they gave meaning to the smile, which means their spiritual powers, because our thought is a spiritual power. Our thought is not really the brain. The brain only is a processor. But what chooses to think the way we think is our soul. And that's why Abdul Baha says that man's reality is his thought. Our reality is our thought. So the way we think about ourselves, the way we think about others, the way we think about life, the way we think about food, the way we think about our experience, all of that is our choice. And the more we are able to have the ability to entertain alternative thoughts, different ways of thinking about one thing, the more freedom and the more doors we have to get out of our one way of thinking, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And when we read a prayer or a tablet, basically, or a hidden word, basically Baha'u'llah is giving us an alternative thought, Abdul Baha is giving us an alternative thought, or the Bab is giving us an alternative thought. And because we are believers, we welcome those thoughts, and these new patterns of thoughts changes the wiring of our brain. It educates and trains the wiring of our brain. That means our brain will develop new capacity to understand different ways of our soul looking at life. Now, psychology today does not acknowledge the role of the soul. Psychology only thinks about the brain, so that's why they say wiring the brain. But in essence, we basically fortify our Luke Skywalker self. If anybody watches, have watched Star Wars, I don't know, have you ever watched the Star Wars movies or not?
No, I haven't.
It's very, very interesting because the person who basically created the Star Wars series, really is, you can tell he is familiar with the two self concepts.
Uh-huh.
And it's just like all the movies which are about good and evil, like Lord of the Ring, and so many movies are about good and evil, and Star Wars is one of them. And the character, which is the Luke Skywalker, actually, is a higher self kind of a character. The spiritual self is kind, is wanting to bring everybody together, wants to help, wants. It's very, very absolutely determined to be about goodness. The Darth Vader character, believe it or not, used to be the father of Luke Skywalker. But in the Star Wars, this character, this reality is possessed by dark forces. So he becomes so evil that he even wants to harm and kill and destroy his own son. And he does not really recognize his own spiritual side at all. It's the spiritual side of the Darth Vader is completely blocked. So Darth Vader makes decisions based on the dark forces, and Luke Skywalker makes decisions based on goodness and godlikeness. So that's why the Star Wars is very fascinating story series to watch, and most people in the West have watched it. So when you say, you need to summon your Luke Skywalker and put aside your Darth Vader, everybody knows what you're talking about. I have a feeling that Iranians have not watched it for whatever reason. But there are other metaphors that we can use for this whole notion of the two selves. The Guardian talks about it as a lower self and higher self, the animal self and the spiritual self. So psychology of the West still is not really very knowledgeable about the role of these two. So when you go to a therapist, they generally say, "Oh, talk about yourself," and generally they attend to the lower self. Who harmed you, who bothered you, who is your enemy, who has traumatized you, that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at ourselves from these two point of these two selves makes us to be very engaged in choosing our thoughts, because Baha'u'llah talks about, when we are thinking a thought about war, we should be trying hard to find another thought about peace much stronger. That means we should be a lot more emotionally invested and determined to be about peace. So the students who come and sit down and then they don't get along with each other, they have to ask themselves which side, which self they are giving permission to be in charge of their kingdom. And whichever self they give more permission more times, that self becomes the ruler of their kingdom. And that self becomes in charge of all their decisions. And that self is the one that sees the world. When their eyes open or their choices they make, that self is the one who makes choices. And that is going to be really a very sad way of running your own life, to make your Darth Vader or your lower self to be the ruler of your kingdom. And each person can decide. And the Guardian actually says that there is only one person we can change. And who's that?
Ourselves?
Exactly. So there is nobody else can change us if we don't want to. And we basically can change only one person. Doesn't matter whether we are a teacher, we are a friend, we are a mother, we are a father. We can only really change one person, and that's ourselves. And the Guardian makes a very interesting metaphor. He says each person is like a plowman. You know what's the plowman? You're like the guy who walks in the field and planting seeds and planting corn and planting,
Yeah.
And so they have a plow in their hand, a shokh.
Uh-huh.
and then they make a furrow. They dig a furrow, a whole line. They dig it all the way, long distance, and then they plant seeds in there. And in order to farm a very huge area, they need these furrows need to be very straight and nice and long. And the Guardian says, the person who's making that furrow needs to be keeping his or her eye on their own plow and not to turn to their faces to the right or to the left and say, and be curious about what other people are doing or not doing. The Guardian says, if you do that, then your furrow becomes crooked. You cannot have a straight one. And he says that he uses that metaphor for our life. So we need to be only looking at our own self and correcting our own self. We are the only person we are in charge of. Even parents cannot force us, even manifestations of God. Baha'u'llah says, love me that I may love thee, right? If thou lovest me, my love can in no wise reach thee. Means if you don't allow me to help you, if you don't allow me to give you alternative ways of looking and thinking, I cannot force myself. Even God cannot. It's just like a sun. He says, if you close all the windows and pull all the drapes, the sun cannot come in.
Yeah.
So that's the nature of this star, the fact that we have two selves, that we choose our thoughts, and our thoughts, the choice of our thoughts creates the way we feel, and the intention and the deeds, all of that is controlled by the way we think about it. Sometimes we can change ourselves by changing the deed. For example, you're looking at the food that your mother or father or whoever put in front of you, and you might think, gosh, I don't think I like that. So if you stay with that thought, you might not be able even to change it. But what you can do sometimes is the person basically takes the chance and puts a little piece of that food in their mouth, and they might decide that, well, it wasn't as bad as I thought. And then the second time they might say, it wasn't that bad. And then finally they might like it. And I have a story about that. When I was a child, my father, in the morning we had breakfast together, and my father one day brought some turnips, shalgam. And then they were cooked, and my father had discovered that they are very good for your health, especially if you have cold. They have some good substances in it with corona and all those things. So, and shalgam or turnips, they have a very strong smell.
Yeah, so really bad.
So all the kids, as we saw him bringing this on the table, we all said, ooh, we hold our noses. No, we don't want that. And so our father was very wise. He said, okay, you guys don't have to have it. And we saw him cutting these turnips in slices, and he was putting a little bit of salt, and he was eating it with such pleasure.
Yeah.
And brings into action another aspect of us, which is on this flip side of our senses, which is our imagination and also our mirror neurons. And you remember mirror neurons, right?
Yeah.
Mirror neurons, and you can find, and then your friend can find a video on YouTube by Nova, N-O-V-A, on mirror neurons. This is a 10-minute video, but it's very, very, very informative and very fascinating for everybody. I watch it so many times. I still would enjoy when I'm watching it. And the kids especially can have a discussion about how they experience their own mirror neurons. And for example, if they throw something, let's say a stone even, into the water or from a high distance, as the stone goes down, you almost feel the feeling that the pit of your stomach, almost like you are the one who's falling. So this is how mirror neurons function. as we were watching our father eating that thing, that turnip with such joy, we became curious. But we didn't decide to go ahead and act on our curiosity. So we were wondering in our thoughts. So, but we set aside. Tomorrow morning, he brought it again and he ate it, and we thought, boy, is he having such a good time. So we said, can we have a little taste? And then he gave us a little taste, and we said, oh, no, 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 we don't want that. La, la, la. And then he continued eating it with joy. We said to ourselves, how come he's enjoying it so much? And then so the third day, he brought it in, and we said, well, let's try again. So we tried it, and we started liking it. And the fourth and the fifth day, we were gobbling it the whole thing up. Now we were used to it. So we developed a new way of experiencing turnips, but we entered from the zone of our deeds. It wasn't the thought that so much changed us, but it was watching somebody else doing it. Now, this watching somebody else doing something can be dangerous and can be good, or can be to our detriment. So if we watch, Abdul Baha talks about don't expose yourself to criminal movies, violent movies, sex and stuff like that, because they definitely alter the way our brain wires and works, and they contaminate our taste and taste bud, spiritual taste buds, and affects us. I give you a little fascinating story that was on the radio talk the other day, and I had never heard that. So before I forget it, I want to share it here. So there are, Facebook has a lot of, millions, billions of people put whatever comes to their head or they find interesting on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
But some of these stuff cannot be posted on Facebook because they are so violent, they're so vile, they're so from the lower self that Facebook will get into trouble if they allow it to be shown to people. It will damage other people. So what they have done is initially they had a few people, but now they hired thousands and thousands and thousands of people around the world to do this dirty job for them, cleaning Facebook and axing these ugly stuff that people come from their darts Vader side and they want to put out there. And so the research people decided to go find these people who are doing this work for Facebook and have an interview with them. They found out that many of these people don't want to talk to you. They will not tell you even what they're doing. So for a long time, the radio conversation was playing it. They went to the person to say, do you do this work for Facebook? It's no. So they, after a while, they found this one person in Philippines. And apparently, because Filipino people speak English very well, they get a lot of these outsourced jobs from companies in US. They work for tech support, customer service, all of these things. India and Philippines have the most, because most of the youth, all of their studies are in English, so they speak English very well. And especially Filipinos are even better. And so they get a lot of these jobs. They don't get as much paid because they're cheaper. So Facebook is hiring apparently, I don't know, many thousand, 100,000, whatever, because of the size of Facebook. And then, so this one person was okay to talk about what he does. So he started saying the kind of things, there's categories, but the kind of things that he has to act, some of them are so vile and so violent that he cannot sleep at night.
Oh my God.
and he becomes traumatized. And he said, even though he was getting paid very well, after a year, he decided he was going crazy and he
Mhm.
couldn't sleep, he couldn't rest all day long. These scenes of violence, somebody chopping somebody's head, they wanted to put that on Facebook, literally. And
Mhm.
he basically decided it was not worth it. He's going to basically commit suicide if he keeps going like that. So
Mhm.
he quit the job.
Uh-huh.
So I thought, I was listening to that, and as a psychotherapist, I was thinking, we know for sure that watching violent movies, when Abdul Bahá says, don't watch داستان‌های عشقی غرامی جنایی, don't watch these things. We know as a science, but nobody wants to admit it because the industry makes so much money. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah.
the biggest income of YouTube, of the internet, is from pornography. The
Yeah.
biggest income is from that. And once somebody develops that appetite,
Mhm.
the addiction is the
Yeah.
next hole they fall into. And they become addicted and implanted with that virus. It's like a virus.
Mhm.
Virus plants itself in their soul and they cannot get rid of it.
Yeah.
They put their foot somewhere that if they want to, they cannot take their foot back. Fit,
Mhm.
they're done. They are with the virus. And then they become contagious themselves. It's really no different than the coronavirus, but in a
Yeah.
very, very bad way. Coronavirus attacks your body, your lung, your kidneys. This one attacks your soul and
Yeah.
zaps it. So you become a zombie.
Mhm.
And you become basically their lifetime consumer, and then they consume you and every bit of your life. You become an addict, and like any addict, you can't be free. That's it. That's at the end of it. So this whole notion of mirror neurons and our imagination and the way it works needs to be respected tremendously and guarded and protected from exposure to this kind of a spiritual virus.
Mhm.
So the watching the mirror neuron would be helpful for the youth, and knowing how the world, how human experience becomes very, very, very limited when we expose ourselves to stuff that
Yeah.
we cannot liberate ourselves from it. Um, it's like exposing yourself to alcohol or sex or drugs. All of those addictive elements does the same thing. The way we share a story is like, the best way would be, think about something happy. So if you
Mhm.
think about something happy to happen to you, you can tell me the story and then say what happened, basically. What did you think about it?
Yeah.
How did you feel about it? What was your intention and what was the action?
Can I
So,
ask a question?
mhm.
So, what if my intention, for example, in the example of somebody smiling in the room, what if my intention is to smile back, but my action is not smiling back? Can it happen?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of times, because let's say that we see our we see our homework. Our teacher sends us our homework. We see, oh my goodness, I got all this homework, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I got to do this homework because if I don't do, I get in trouble. I'm
Mhm.
feeling very stressed. I'm feeling very motivated. I want to do it, but somehow I cannot bring my intention into conformity with my action. Between my intention and action, I fall on my face because I get distracted. I say, oh, let me go eat something first. And I go eat something, and 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes passes. Oh, let me call so and so. And so basically, I start dilly dallying the time. I cannot translate my intention or my thought into action. And
Mhm.
the Guardian talks about that actually. He says there are a lot of people, Baha'is, who are devoted, deeply devoted. They would be willing to give their life, but they cannot bring their intention and their thoughts into conformity with their action. They act in a self-destructive way.
So they act, but in a bad way.
They destroy their own spiritual
Yeah.
self, what we call self-destructive way.
That's
So
right.
most people who have developed addiction, that is their biggest problem. They might have good intention, but they cannot bring themselves together with their needs and their intention, and they suffer the rest of their life because the addiction basically has a lot more power over them that they are able to basically act. So this bringing knowing what to do in order to bring your intention into action takes tremendous amount of support, discipline. That's why peer pressure makes a big difference. That's why when we are with our peers, we act crazy stuff, we do crazy stuff, we do risky stuff because peer pressure. It channels the intentions into a different direction.
That's right.
So that's why it's very important to have a junior youth support group together. That's why it's very important to talk to each other. That's why it's important to decide together to do something good and develop good habits. And the other thing is developing habits plays a very important role in being able to translate our good intention into action.
That's right. Thank you.
There's a lot of tricks that goes into this whole notion of knowing how to bring into action our prayers or our best wishes and our hopes, and consult, for example, and then Abdul Baha teaches us little by little, day by day, kam roos be roos. So you start doing one good thing every day, and start eating the right food every day. Start exercising every day. Start praying and meditating every day a little bit until you develop habits. And you develop a craving and an appetite. Basically, it's about training our appetites.
Thank you for explaining.
Any other questions?
No, that's it. Thank you.